Welcome to Legacy Battle. Make sure you hit that like, subscribe, notification button. I'm Michael Adams. My panelists tonight from the Gridiron Battle Zone, Brian King, Penn State Collegiate Hockey All-Star, Kevin Adams, Steelers Nation South, Rollo Cawthon. Our debate tonight is the greatest goalie of the 1980s. There is a prerequisite. You had to at least played 300 or more games during that time period in the 80s. We are joined by an NHL goalie drafted by the Quebec Nordiques. He'd play for the Oilers, Kings, and Blackhawks with a career 2.79 goals against average. Pretty impressive for his time period. After the NHL, he played overseas. We want to welcome goalie Steve Passmore. Steve, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. As always, we're going to have our Q&A afterwards for Steve about his career. And you won't want to miss those clips that we're going to have of him and some of his goalie fights, because there's nothing better than a goalie fight in hockey. So our honorable mentions tonight. Goalies that just missed the list. That's Lemelin and Barrasso. So very solid goalies in the 80s. But we're going to start with Brian. Who are you bringing us?
All right. I got Mike Laout, 6'2", 195 pounds. Over the course of the 1980s decade, his time was almost evenly spent between the St. Louis Blues and the Hartford Whalers. The 80-81 season was very special for Laout. He had 33 wins to just 14 losses, and he led the league in a statistic called goals saved above average with a mark of 33.5. And he was so well regarded that he won the Lester B. Pearson Award for best player in the league, and he finished second in the Hart Trophy voting to some guy named Wayne Gretzky. So very, very respectful there. Laout continued with his high-quality play throughout the rest of the decade, logging tons of time between the pipes. In 81-82 and 82-83, he led in games played, minutes, and saves. In fact, for the 80s decade, no one played more games and minutes than Laout. But he was much more than that. He also led the decade for wins with 239 and shutouts with 22. And speaking of shutouts, he was the league leader in both 86-87 and 89-90 seasons. What's most impressive about Laout was that he played this well despite being with some teams without the greatest offensive talent or greatest stability. Probably the best example of this was the 87-88 season. Laout willed the Whalers into the playoffs despite a coaching change mid-season and an offense with the second fewest goals in the entire league, or 89-90, when they made the playoffs despite being ranked 19th out of 21 teams in offense, or in the 1986 playoff series against the Habs, when he stole 3 wins and lost a heartbreaker in Game 7 in overtime, despite the Whalers' offense only scoring 13 goals in 7 games. That's not even 2 per game. Yet, when he had a great team in front of him, Laout was able to guide Team Canada to a silver medal in the Canada Cup in 1981. Laout is a kind of one of those what-if stories, not because he got hurt or got in trouble, but because he was a great goaltender who never really got that supporting cast that he really deserved. Yet he put up some impressive numbers over a great decade for the game of hockey.
Steve, his numbers were impressive for what he had in front of him. I noticed, though, he only represented Canada one time. I was surprised we didn't see him again in 84. But what were your thoughts on his goaltending? I mean, did he have any weaknesses that you noticed?
Well, if he was who took over for him for Canada then?
Pete Peters was in 84. That's who I'm repping, just to throw that out.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Obviously not a bad go-to. Laout, I didn't realize that he had such high numbers. He, like you said, probably had a bit of the, bad team, good goalie sort of thing, right? So and ran that a lot in his career, and I think that's probably why you don't get the accolades as much when you've got that, because stand on your head all you want, but it comes down to what you did in the playoffs.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, is it maybe because most of his time spent in Hartford that he's not the household name he should be based off his statistics?
People don't even remember Hartford had a team.
Right. Yeah.
And that's
like other than a really, really cool look when they had the Cooperalls and the whale tail. I mean, that green is atrocious, especially
love
when you
it.
go head to toe with it with a Cooperall suit. That is not a good look.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're gonna change the order up here a little bit. I was gonna go Kevin next, but let's stick with a goalie who's kind of just like Mike was a little under the radar here, and that's Pete Peters. So 418 games played in the 80s. That's a lot of hockey games for a goalie, but a record of 207, 142, and 19. Played with the Flyers, Bruins, and Capitals. So he did have a little bit better teams there than Brian's guy, but his 3.13 goals against average is the best tonight. His save percentage, 884, is the second best tonight, as well as the second tonight, let's see, with shutouts at 19. So very impressive there. And Steve might love this stat. His 144 penalty minutes is more than double than anybody else we're talking about tonight. I don't know if that's good or bad. That could go either way, but that I love seeing that. So 82-83 season, he led the league in wins, goals against, and shutouts. He wins the Vezina that year. He's a 4-time All-Star in the 80s, and he made first team in 83 as well, NHL first team. And here's a great stat. His adjusted goals against is 7th all-time in NHL history. So
What's
that's one of those
adjusted
stats.
goals against? What does that
Right.
mean?
So that's one of those stats where they take every era and the amount of goals scored and what you would score in what you would save or score in different eras. So when they average that
It's a
out,
bullshit stat.
Yeah, pretty much, but I'm going to use it for my argument.
He just likes to
So-
make it sound good for his players. That's that he just throws
That's
out
right.
stuff.
But he did help lead Philly to the 80 Cup Finals. And at the 1984 Canada Cup, Pete Peters outplayed Grant Fuhrer and Lemelin, leading them Canada to the championship in that cup there. So he is the only goalie in NHL history to have two 25-plus game unbeaten streaks, and one of two goalies, Cheevers being the other one, to have a 30-plus game unbeaten streak. Steve, can you even comprehend winning more than 30 games straight in a row?
Okay, so I went 4 months in a row without a loss in the NHL, and nobody brings that up. I think I only played 7 games in 4 months, but I mean, I did go 4 months without losing a game. So I the numbers don't lie. But no, I couldn't imagine. You know what? When you get on a streak like that, it's your team believes that you're just not going to lose. And the only time that I got a chance to do anything near that was in junior, not in the pros. But it just, you get to a spot where you're not going to lose, but to do that in the NHL, that's insane.
So, like Brian's guy, he flies under the radar. He's never mentioned in like the great goalies. So, I mean, what do you think?
I disagree. I think Pete Peters is a name that when you look at that era, I think his name comes up before Liut.
Oh, okay. I'll take that. All right.
I think so. Well, I'm not blowing smoke, but it's just like I think Pete Peters is a guy that would come to mind more often.
Okay. Well, let's move on to someone that's got he's got the pedigree with the wins here. Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, I got Grant Fuhrer, played for the Oilers all the 80s, during which time he won 5 Stanley Cups. Yes, he did have a great supporting cast, I'm not going to lie, but that's still impressive. 5 cups. He was a 6-time All-Star, 1 first team, 1 second team. He also got one of the Canadian Cup All-Star teams, which is pretty impressive. He won the Vezina Trophy in the 88 season for the best goaltender. He won 2 Gold Cups under the Canadian Cup in the 80s, as well as the silver at the World Championship in the 80s. He holds the NHL record for longest undefeated streak by a goaltender in his first NHL season. It was in 81-82. He went 23 games unbeaten. He holds the NHL record for most assists by a goaltender in a single season. He had 14 in 83 and 84. Fuhrer ranks 3rd in wins in the 80s with 211. He's tied for 4th for the most wins in a single season with 40 wins. He faced 3rd most shots in the 80s. With 11,612, saved over 10,000 of those. However, one of the most impressive stats I'd have to say is he started 73 games in the 87-88 season and played 75 games total that year, leading the 1980s in both categories. It's also worth noting that they went 16-2 in the playoffs that year to win the Stanley Cup. four rounds, playing at least 4 games. That's 16. Only took him 2 extra to win the cup that year. 16-2. That's pretty impressive. In 2017, he was named 100 of the greatest NHL players in history. He set a number of firsts for black ice hockey players in the NHL, including the first to win the Stanley Cup and being the first inducted into the Hall of Fame, which was in 2003. He's got the stats. He's got the cups. He's our guy tonight.
Steve, did the Oilers' style of play hurt or help his numbers?
So what was his goals against average?
It's hold on, I got it. 3.71.
Yeah, shitty. Honestly, like, and don't get me wrong, like he was unbelievable. He was fun to watch. I remember as a kid never being happier than getting my LG 55 Grant Fuhrer pads because he had the coolest looking gear out there. He was the first to have cool looking gear and probably sucked everybody into being a goalie. His assists are bullshit because you give it to Coffee. You stop the puck, you touch the puck, you give it to Coffee. He goes down the ice and scores, and you got to help her. That's not cool. Like, that's not, you're not a Hextall, a Marty Turco, a guy that's firing the puck around. He didn't play the puck a lot. But 14 assists. I'm going to say you helped by your team there. You have a 3.7 goals against average. You know where that would get you on any other team? In the minors.
Yeah.
Like legitimately, if you had a 3.7 goals against average on any other team, you would not have that many wins. And I'm not taking anything away from his goaltending ability. He was amazing. And if you, to quote Wayne Gretzky, any goalie, hands down, if you had to win one game for everything in the world, he'd pick Furzy every time. And I think that shows you that that's a guy that that had the composure. You never worried about him. It was just gonna be like, yep, he's got our back. And I think that's what you want in a goalie. It's just somebody that you have so much confidence in. But let's be honest, when I have better numbers than you, it's not a good thing.
Right. Well, I know we had Bill Ranford on the show. He, of course, was Grant Fuhrer's back up there for a while. He said that, he was very helpful to him and encouraging, and, it wasn't like a rivalry. It was, hey, let's go out there and win no matter who's in goal. So, I mean, you got to respect that from a player because it's hard when there's somebody coming on your heels. So, but Rollo, finish us out. Who's your player?
I got Andy Moog. Andy Moog from Penticton, British Columbia. Was picked in the 7th round of the 80 NHL entry draft. He spent 18 years in the NHL, but the majority of his time in the 80s was spent with Edmonton and Boston. He wound up taking over, being one of the primary goaltenders in 82, 83, as the Oilers would make it to the Stanley Cup against the Islanders, but they would get swept. But despite spending a lot of his time, with Grant Fuhrer, he was able to win 143 wins in his time with Edmonton. He would win 3 Stanley Cups. He would also win the 89-90 Williams Jennings Trophy with Boston. Goals against average in the 80s was 3.14. So he was a pretty good goaltender compared to Grant Fuhrer. He wound up walking out on the Oilers, demanding a trade, and eventually getting traded to Boston from the Oilers and spending a couple of years with Boston. He would make a Stanley Cup with Boston in 89-90, spending time with Reggie Lemelin. But he was basically a backup for a lot of his time with those squads. But look at the win totals that he had, even splitting time with other netminders. Andy Moog.
Steve, I know you said you're very familiar with him. What are your thoughts on Andy?
So Moger was one of the guys. So again, smaller goalie. I happen to have a bit of a soft spot for the smaller goalies. He was definitely one of them. Great individual off the ice. I was lucky enough to go play in his charity tournament in Penticton, as I'd go down there and play or coach in hockey down there in the summer at summer schools, at hockey schools. Great guy. He definitely got overshadowed in Edmonton, and ballsy for him to say trade me and go from such a good team, but he wasn't going to beat Fuhr out, right? Like he wasn't, and not saying that he wasn't as good, but you're not gonna get out of there. So good for him to go to Boston and have the balls to say, hey, I'm a starter and I don't deserve to be a 1B kind of guy. He was solid. Like if you look at the 80s, he's definitely a guy. And again, I'm a BC boy, so I think that's where he's in Penticton. I was in Grand Forks and now in Kamloops. Just a local legend for sure.
He had some good years in the 90s too with the Dallas Stars. It was towards the end of his career, but I remember him being solid there too. So
absolutely. Hey, Robbie, stop standing on your head there, dude. There you go. Jesus, spinning.
So let's move into our vote, guys. This is a tough one tonight. Can't pick your own. Brian, who you taking?
This is tough, but I think I got to go. I got to go with Peters on this one. I mean, Fuhr that 3.7 is just I can't get down with that. And Moog, I mean, Lemieux pretty much ruined him after that series there. And what was that, 89, 90 or something? So I got to go with Peters.
Yeah, man, I'm with you on Grant Fuhr. I mean, it's hard to not say he wasn't amazing because he was, but man, that team in front of him,
0.002% within all of your goaltenders for save percentage.
Yeah, okay, whatever. He's got Wayne Gretzky in front of him, Mark Messier on the other line. I mean, I could have named 20 more guys that are,
And
all
Peters
Hall of
had
Fame.
Francis and Howe for a little bit.
Gordie Howe was 90 years old at that point. But all right, I'm just gonna make.
Yeah, but he's still playing in the league.
He was. I'm giving mine. I'm gonna go Mike Leute because I think he's very underrated. So Kevin.
All right. Well, I already made my comment about the save percentage. I have Andy Moog at 3.54 GAA, not a 3.14, and Leo at a 3.53. Which, to be honest, both of those aren't any much better than a 3.7. So I'm going to go with Peters. Yeah, 3.07 from the stats I'm looking at. So I'm going to go with him, Pete Peters.
Right. Well, my stats were just from the 80s. So
yeah, that's what I'm looking at too.
Oh, so I was looking at. All right. Whatever. Internet lies. Go ahead, Rollo.
I'm going to go with Leute.
Okay. Hey, pressure on you, Steve. You can break the tie or pick any of the four.
Leute.
Oh, okay. Jesus. You know what? I'm not going with Fuhr, even though huge fan. But I definitely think the scale was tilted a little bit. Leute, I didn't realize had such a good career. Pete Peters, I think that's a name that I would say I know more. But you know what? I'm going to stick with my BC boy, and I'm going with Andy Moog all the way.
Okay, there we go. So 2 for Peters, two for Leute, 1 for Moog. Well, we got a tie here. We haven't had a tie in forever.
And I love the guy that has the most Stanley Cups didn't even get a vote.
Yeah. What's that say?
Right? Like,
hey, we keep it real, man.
That's right. He's the only one in the hall.
Okay. Yeah. He wasn't bad. You look at his career, I'd trade mine with his any day, but it's funny he didn't get a vote.
I wonder what he would have done on like Leute's teams. I mean, would Grant Fuhr be able to keep the Whalers winning? I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know.
So goaltending, though, it's a different animal for sure. And there's guys that do really, really well on shitty teams, and they stand out because they're just whatever it is that's good for them. Lots of shots, really busy, and there's guys that do really well on going, okay, I'm gonna nap for 5 minutes because the puck's in the other end, but when they come down, I'm gonna stand on my head. and then I'm going to have another 5-minute nap. And I think Fuhr was that guy that made incredible saves at the right time, but probably wasn't that busy.
Yeah.
So I think you gotta from a goaltending man's like mindset. I think that it's a totally different thing. And I went from that. I'm just looking over your shoulder there, Brian, and I'm seeing the Victoria Cougars emblem, and I went from averaging 55 shots a game against to in junior getting traded to Kamloops. And I remember my first game, they had 21 shots. We won 2-1 and everybody's all excited, but I'm like, 21 shots, that's like a period. That's like a night off. Like
Right.
I had, so I think I'm just saying when you're looking at the goalies and the teams they were on, it's a relevant factor.
I get it. Yeah.
All right, well, let's move into our Q&A. We'll go Brian, Kevin, Rollo, me.
Okay.
Make them good. Dig.
All right. So, Steve, November 12th, 1999, you recorded your first NHL shutout, 24 save performance against the Islanders. What did it feel like to know that you shut the door on another team like that? And did it boost your confidence going forward?
It was a 5-0 shutout. 24 shots. I mean, we were in Chicago. We were shitty. But anytime I will say over my career, I am the guy that probably, if you look back and you went through all of my numbers, I probably ruined more shutouts in the last 2 minutes of a game than any goalie out there. I notoriously in my own head, I could screw that up. Not saying we'd lose the game, but I would blow my own shutout inside 2 minutes, guaranteed, every single time. So it was always it's impressive to just say that I got one in the NHL. I actually have two. The other one was 5-0 as well. So they weren't clutch games, but anytime you can blank a team, it's it pumps you up a bit for sure.
All right. I want to take you to the early 2000s. I saw an interview with you. It was around your secret to beating the Red Wings. And you replied, I don't know. You said, fear maybe, who knows, but it's a thrill to play against those guys. I don't want to make them sound old, but I grew up watching those guys on television. So what was it like to play the Red Wings in the early 2000s? You got Yzerman, Fedorov, Shanahan, Lindstrom. Like, tell us about that. What is the secret?
So I don't know, and I don't know why, but when we played on the road in Detroit, I played. Every game. It didn't matter. So my first game in there, I think we won 4-2, and we got outshot like 40-22, I think it was, and we won 4-2. And from that time on, it didn't matter. Tebow was my goalie partner in Chicago. And T would laugh because he's like going to Detroit and he's like, guess you're playing. It's like, shit. Yeah, I probably am. So I think over my career, and you guys are going to probably fact check me on this, but the only game that I lost there was actually when I went there with LA and I lost in overtime. But that was the only game I lost in the Joe. Fact check the shit out of it. I could be wrong. I'm a little old. My memory's not quite there, but it was just insane. For whatever reason, I loved playing in that rink. My favorite memory of that rink was getting two-handed by Stevie Yzerman. Like he turned around. I pissed him off so much on the power play, and I kept hacking his ankles and gave him spear maybe between the legs. I don't know. And he turned around and two-handed me right across the chest. And that was the funniest thing in the world because I'm like, I just pissed off one of my idols and a guy that's amazing. And I think I just pissed him off enough to actually slash me. So I don't know what it was about Detroit, but because we were bad, they were good. But I had some of my best games probably ever in the Joe.
Do you think it was because who you were going up against? Like you felt you had something to prove, or?
I had nothing to prove. I was shitty. But I don't know, whatever it was such a fun atmosphere to play in. There, the arena was electric. The fans were having a ton of fun, and their team was so good. It was, it was the Cinderella every time. If you could pull a point out of there, you were pretty pumped. And it was just, you're a bit of a fanboy when you went in there, like just looking at the guys across from you, and who's coming down. And yeah, you definitely a bit of fanboying for sure.
Steve, the 01-02 season, you started 13 games in the regular season, but you started 2 in the playoffs against St. Louis. What was the atmosphere like when coming out there on the playoffs as a starter? And what do you remember most about those games?
So a couple things. One was we couldn't score a goal if you paid us. Because that was when they shut us out 3 of those games. They shut us out. So pretty tough to get a win out of that. But it was funny because I remember the end of that year. So remember when I said I went 4 months without losing a game? That was it. I was playing well as a backup, just basically doing what you're supposed to do, which means give your team a chance to win. Don't shit the bed, and give your starter the night off. That's sort of your job. And then we were going into playoffs, and I remember the media was making a bit of a scene where they're like, well, who's going to start in the playoffs? I'm like, I'm going to assume the guy that's your starter and you're paying $3 million a year. I bet you he's going to start, right? But then we started, and T wasn't playing badly, but we weren't scoring. They literally shut us out 3 games in a row. And I even remember the start in Chicago. We lost 2-1, and so my goals against average in the playoffs is pretty solid. I'll put it up against most guys. Still don't have a win, but it was incredible for me to just get a chance to start in the playoffs. Never mind say we made the playoffs, because we were pretty terrible for many years I was there, but to get a chance to start in the playoffs was it's a different feeling for sure. In just the chills down your spine and just going, holy shit, we're really here. There's 16 teams left and we're one of them. We're probably not going to do much with it, but we're at least there. We're at the dance.
Right. Well, let's talk about the mental part of the game here. So as a goalies want to play, because the more you play, the more you're in tune. How hard is it, like just stress-wise and focus-wise, to either A, have to come off the bench, or B, like you said, only play 7 times in 4 months?
Well, you never wanted to come off the bench. When you noticed your starter was struggling, you tried not to make eye contact with the coach, just in case he gives you the nod and he's like, you're going in. It's like, oh, Jesus. You're usually down 3 or 4 at that point. The teams normally give it up at that point. And you're like, oh, okay. How about I go get beat down for 2 periods? That'll be fun. Right?
Right.
And then the other side of the game is when you're the backup, you might sit there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and not play. And then when you do get a chance, it's on the back end of a back-to-back against the best team in the league. And the coach is going, you're like sacrificial lamb. It's like, if you do something cool, great. But that's sort of all it is. And it's really tough to not play in game situations for that long and then go against the best players in the world and try and stand on your head and hope you come out with a win. Because the other thing is if you don't, you're not seeing the ice again for a while, right? Like that's the mindset. That's the part that plays on your mind, is you're like, okay, I've got to go stand on my head, give my team a chance to win. And if I shit the bed, I might not see the ice again for a long time. Like I remember the one, I don't know, 01 year season, I didn't see the ice in all of October. Like we're starting the season and T plays every single game. And I remember going into Sutter was our coach, and I go into him like, hey, so what's going on? What can I do to earn a start? I'm like, don't give me one. How can I earn it? He's like, oh, pass. I love you. You're first guy on the ice, last guy off. You're doing it. You're working hard. I'm like, okay, how can I earn a start? Oh, you're doing everything. No, give me a start. It's ending October. I have not played yet. And, that's a long time to go to get dip your toe in the water when it's coming into your season. And then, you're 11 games deep in the season, and now it's like, okay, try and go win a game. So it's definitely a different attitude, especially when you went from most of us that were backups in the show, we were starters at every other level we went to, right? So we were starters, whether it was in junior, minor hockey, junior, the minors, everything. As you work your way through the hockey ranks in the world, you were always a starter. And now it's like, oh, guess what? You're second best. Shit. Okay. So now you really do have to adjust your mental game where you were just used to playing, and it was just second nature. You went out, you played. Of course I'm playing tomorrow. Why wouldn't I? And then you went to, oh, I haven't played in 3 weeks, like an actual game. I've practiced my ass off, and I've been the black ace, and I've been out there, taking the one-timer practice off my collarbones every day. And now you have to go win. So it's definitely a different mentality. And I tip my cap to any backups that that are career backups. And I would say there's been a few guys that you would consider that career backup guy. Look at Bob Asenza, a guy that that was just kind of the backup. But he was steady, good guy in the room. Everybody. But when he went in there, he gave you a chance to win. That's guy. I tip my cap to those guys because I think it's a lot different job. I'm not saying it's a harder job than the starter. It's just a very different job.
Right. There's been a lot of guys who've done that. Like Ron Tugnut comes to mind for me. Like, he started at some places, but he was, back up in a lot of places too. And he always gave you a chance when he came in there. So can't argue with the stats. Brian, go ahead.
Well, Steve, you mentioned him a few times. Jocelyn Tebow, he was your teammate in goal in Chicago for a few years there. Can you tell us about him? What was he like? Maybe any funny stories?
Really, he was a good guy. He was he was a solid teammate, and especially when you're in a tandem, like there was not. Trust me, I wasn't pushing for his job. Like it's not like he felt that I was right on his heels or anything like that. But whenever I went in and played, he was probably my biggest fan. Like he wanted me to do well. He wanted me to succeed. He wanted me to win a game. And he knew that, again, we knew our roles. He was the starter. I was a shit bum. Okay, that's what it is. So it's, whenever he said, I need a night off, I'm like, I got you. I'll give you a night off. And there was the only funny story I have was one night we came into Colorado late, and you guys know what Ambien is? Those sleeping pills?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, he took one too early off the bus. And this is a kid that he didn't drink much, he didn't do it, but you would have thought he was hammered out of his mind. He's hallucinating, he was talking in tongues, and I had to get his butt to bed because we were roommates. But that's about it. He was a good, solid human, and he was a great teammate. As far as when you're the backup, if your starter never felt threatened, and he was just wanting you to do well. And again, maybe it's because he knew that you weren't going to take his job.
So I want to talk about, I know we talked about some of your goalie fights before we got on here. So I want to talk about the fights. There's been talk about getting fighting out of the NHL, but we all know the fans love the fights, especially when the goalies drop it and get into it. So what's your take on fights in the NHL and being a goalie that threw it down a couple of times? What was it like jumping in there for your teammates?
I like fighting. That's just me. Not only do I like it in the game, I enjoy it myself. My biggest year was junior. I had 90, I think I had 92 PIMs one year. You can, again, Hockey DB, fact check me. I had 5 fighting majors that year. It just sometimes, especially when the goalies get it, there's probably not a real reason to do it other than goalies are like, woohoo, I get to do it. Cool. This will be fun. Right. Other than the one time I've done it a couple times and we're shorthanded and there was a line brawl and I had to grab somebody. That happened in junior. Actually, I'd gotten traded from Victoria to Kamloops, and the next night, two games after that, we played Victoria. So it's my old team. We're shorthanded. There's a line brawl. I'm like, cool. I'll just grab somebody. I did my job. I'll just grab somebody. We'll sit and shoot the shit. And so I grab this guy, go out there, drop everything, grab this guy, spin him around. I'm like, oh, I don't know you. He got traded the same day I did to the team. And the guy's name was Rhett Warner. And he was there. He was a tough guy, got traded from Saskatoon to Victoria. So I had to fight him, and that was just a bad idea. But he was trying to go after one of our smaller defensemen, and I thought, well, I'd rather get my ass kicked than our defenseman get his ass kicked. So I held my own. I will say that I don't know if there's video footage of that. Apparently, the only video footage you guys have of my fights is me getting my butt handed to me. But I think fighting has a spot in hockey. I don't think you should ever get rid of it. You're talking about a highly physical contact sport. I'd rather see guys drop the gloves and square off than the slashing, the high sticks, the cheap shot, the hit from behind. I'd rather 2 guys drop them, go at it, and settle things. If you look at any of the real, not only the tough guys, but most guys, when they get done, you're gonna have a fight and you're gonna go for a beer after the game. Like, it is not, I hate you, I'm gonna hunt your family down. It's not that at all. It's emotional, it's physical, it's spur of the moment. You want to go? Sure. Okay. Afterwards, like, oh wow, that was pretty good. Okay. See you tomorrow? Sure. Like, the best team, the closest and best team I ever played on ever, we had more practice fights than I've ever had on any other team. And I think the reason we fought in practice so much is because the intensity was there and everybody just wanted to be the best. And so I don't think it's a negative thing. I know it gets a bad rap, but I'll tip my cap to any of those tough guys. And I played with some of the best. I played with Proby. I played with Grimson, Vandenbush, George Leroy. Like, I played with some of the toughest guys out there, and they earn your respect, man. Like, I'll tip my cap to them. That is not a freaking easy job. So anybody that's against it, I dare them to try it.
Steve, who would you put on your Mount Rushmore of hockey goalies?
Wow. Ken Dryden's number 1. There's a reason I wore number 29 my entire career, because it was him. Dude won, what did he win? 8 cups. And he retired in the height of his career. Like that, it boggles my mind what he did. He retired at the top, and he just went, I guess I'm done. I'll go be a lawyer or something, because he was the only smart goalie ever. It's not a position that's known for Mensa type people for sure. I would put him on there. Who else would I put on there? That's a really Mike Palmatier, strictly for he was fun to watch. He was flashy. He probably wasn't that great of a goalie, but he was fun to watch. Who else? I'd honestly I'd probably put Ole Kolzig. I know you guys like, what? No. For two reasons. One, I got to play with him when I was 15 and 16 in junior. An incredible human being. And I think he was, I'll call him the start of the giant era of giant goalies. And he could move. Like that dude was athletic as hell. So I would put him on there. The fourth has to be Bruder. He was insane. Like he just incredible. And you talk about a guy there. Okay, so we'll go there. Talk about a guy that had an incredible team. But he was the rock of that team. Like that team wasn't half the team they were if they didn't have him. Little story. I remember the first time we went to Jersey, playing in Jersey. I used to stretch at the red line, and so did he. And so we're sitting there stretching, and I'm playing that night, and I can't believe that my idol is sitting 3 feet away from me. And so we chat, and, I'm like, hey, how you doing? Good, good. And I'm like, hey, so can I get an autographed stick? And I'm like, not gonna lie to you, it's not for some dying kid dying of cancer or anything like that. It's not a charity. I'm like, it's for me. I'm a huge fucking fan. I'm like, can I get a stick of yours? And so he giggled a bit and he had the trainer send down an autographed stick for me, which I thought was so cool. But it's one of those moments where you get to play against one of your idols, which is a surreal moment. But there's my top one.
So we'll get you out of here with this. One of the fights that Kevin did not mention that I think he kind of won because he ended up with his jersey over his head was Steve Shields. Full line brawl, Sharks, Blackhawks. What do you remember from that? Like, it almost kind of looked like you started it a little bit there, and before you know it, everyone on the ice is fighting, and then you're over at the bench. Looked like you're picking on the guys on the bench. What do you remember from that night?
Okay, I don't know. I didn't start anything. But it definitely became heated and everybody's involved. And actually, if you watch that clip, so I think the kid's name was Kryaluk. Kryaluk? No. Koraluk, maybe?
Koraluk. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Koraluk.
So I've got him. I'm squared off with him. He's this Russian kid. I don't know him from Adam. And I got my jersey. I get my arm out of my jersey and I'm like, dude, like, you want to go? You want to start throwing? And he's laughing. And I'm like, or are we going to throw? Like, are we just squared off? Are we going to dance? What are we going to do? And we ended up separating after, because I kind of had my guy. So that's kind of what you do as a goalie. It's like, okay, I had my guy. I'm good. And then we separated. Then he fought Doug Smolik and he beat the shit out of him. And I'm like, oh, that was probably a good thing that we didn't throw him, because Z was way tougher than me and a much bigger dude than I was. I think I would have got fed my lunch with that kid. He beat up Z pretty good and tossed him around. So then we got separated. And the reason Shields and I got at it was, I don't know, we ended up going, it was goalies. And again, I like the goalies that are 6'4", and I think they're fun to fight. I don't know why. And then we're squared off, and then Brent Myers comes by and sucker punches me as we're together, and then Probert went after Mizey, and yeah, it was a bit of a mess. Once again, when I was in Chicago, we weren't good, so we had to make up for in other ways, entertain people.
Well, thank you for your time, Steve. Thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate you.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me. And let me know when you get more relevant goalies coming on, and I'll be here again.
Sounds good. And if you are a goalie fan, go in our archives, check them out. We've had Ranford, Pupa, Hedberg, Reggett, Kolzig. He mentioned Ole the goalie. So hit that like, subscribe, notification button, and we'll see everyone next time. Everybody have a great night.